Here's a early 80s Ford pickup, F150, extended cab, offered to me for free. I was at church with a friend, and he was talking to another group of guys, and I overheard the magic words, "Anybody want a free?" And I picked right up. And then he said pickup, even better. So it's very rusty. Don't know if I'm actually going to get it roadworthy or not, or what its exact future is. But it does have a 302 4-speed, so we'll start with that. And now what we're going to do is haul this out after I've gone through the effort of backing in the trailer. Now I'll pull out the trailer. Just make a symbol. There it is, loaded and ready to go. Half an hour, please. So as I said, a friend offered a free truck and I couldn't resist, which is showing my intelligence. So getting it off the trailer, I had to pound on the brake. I was trying to control it going back rather than just counting on the popping the gear. And then the brakes seized up. So I'm just in the process of trying to loosen them now so that I can roll it around. But rust is the main problem, as far as I know. The engine is also seized, but it is a 302 4-speed, so it's worth trying to put some effort into for me. It's kind of a combination I was looking for, but it's sat for 20 plus years, so there's lots of extra life. It's been a condo. Not as bad as an infamous Rolls-Royce convertible that had squirrels and such in it, but this has had lots of mice. And I'll show you one of the nests right now. Somebody did a job on the headliner, decided they didn't need it. And then there, I don't know what that cap is from, but you can see the mouse nest there. I got some work to do to get that out of there. And I picked up some old tires yesterday so I can replace this one, so at least it can roll. There you go, watch this. In here, all sorts of junk. One thing I can't figure out is that there's a rust hole there and a rust hole here, but up here where all the leaves and moss is, go down to the paint. There it is, fresh paint. It's got a sliding back window somebody's put in, but I've seen a guy advertising a rear bed for 150, which needs a bit of work, but nothing like this one does. And the cab is the main problem, though. Needs a complete new floor, and the pillar on the driver's side by the door is rotten right through, quite loose. There's rust in the front fenders. So it may just be heading off to the junkyard. 1980s Fords, maybe other years too, I don't know, use a drive on the end of the distributor. It's 5/16 hex, and that goes down into the oil pump. So I'm going to try and circulate some oil first before I try and start it. So I'm going to use a deep 5/16 socket I've taped it onto the adapter for the drill, and then I will tape these two together as well, and then hopefully I can get the thing to actually I'll have to change the order of these things, but hopefully I get enough distance there that I can run the oil pump with the drill right there. Here goes. I've taken the distributor out, marked the position of the case plus the position of the rotor, so it should be timed when I put it back together. Now to climb up here past this bumper guard, which is kind of in the way. And the first problem is it doesn't fit in the hole. Okay, well, I guess I can't pump oil. It really is too bad. After sitting for 20 years, I would really like it to have some oil. I don't have any sockets thinner than that. It's a 1/4-inch drive, and it's just not going to fit. I've taken out the oil sender. I've got this fitting from my stock of old brass fittings. Said in a masculine manner. And then I've got this pump for draining or filling oil in hard to get at places. So I put in this tubing. This tubing fits on the fitting, and I will put that in the hole. We'll disconnect it first and then wind this in, just hand tight. Put this on, put some oil in this, and push it through the engine. So I took the oil sender unit off. It's attached to this wire. See it right down there. I put in the fitting with the tubing and the hand siphon. I was able to pump in about 1/2 liter of oil, so hopefully that will at least lubricate the rods and mains. I would like to have lubricated the valves too, but the valve gear, but I don't think I can do that. But bad sign is there's little shiny bits, I don't know if you can see them or not, down there in the oil. Yeah, they're showing up now. So that's some of that's light reflection, but if you look carefully you can see really small pieces of aluminum. So probably it's got a bad bearing, or at least well worn. Today I would like to see if I can get this thing started. It's also election day here in Canada, federally, so gotta do that too. So I've blown out around the spark plugs. I'll do it again just to make sure no dirt's there. I'll squirt a little oil in the cylinders. I've pumped down through the oil pressure sender unit. So I put a little oil into the oil pump, hopefully into the rods and mains as well. I doubt I got the piston pins, and I'm pretty sure I didn't get the valve gear. So technically I should take off the valve covers, but I'm just going to try it by hand first and see. And then I'll leave the plugs out, crank it over by hand, and then see how that goes. If that works, then I'll hook up a battery, as this one is 20 years old plus, and see what it does with that. And then if that builds some oil pressure, then I'll pour some gas in the carburetor, disconnect the fuel line because I don't want it pumping anything from the tank, and see if it starts. I've taken out all 8 spark plugs. They all look consistently the same except for this one. Looks like it had a bit more oil residue on it. Other than that, they're all carboned up as if it's had a number of cold starts, not getting warmed up, or the carburetor has a problem, or it's basic tune, but carburetor or cold starts are more likely. They're all about the same except for that one plug. So I'll clean those, gap them, make sure they're okay, and put them back in. But I'm going to squirt oil into each of the spark plug holes. About 3 pumps out of my oil can over here, which I have filled up to make sure that it can pump in any direction. and then I'll try hand cranking. One a tip for removing spark plugs: 3/8 drive. Use a universal joint, especially if you don't have a proper spark plug socket, but this joint prevents or makes it much harder to break a spark plug, whereas if you try a straight shaft extension on the ratchet, you stand a much better chance of breaking a spark plug, which is always a drag. Then you have to go get one. I put the battery in from the trailer, and one thing I found out after spinning it for about 20 seconds is that you have to let your key off in order to see what the oil pressure is. And it starts to go up. So it is pumping oil. Now I'll put the plugs back in, see if I can start it. 2-barrel, unfortunately, but that's life. I would say there's hope. Oh, a bit too much maybe. Watch for flames. I gotta let it sit for a while. It's really got too much gas in it. That's what I'm going to assume anyway. I blew out the fuel line. The needle and seat was stuck in the carburetor. Fortunately, I got that freed up. So I put a temporary line in the gas tank. That goes up to the fuel pump, which is pumping gas into the carburetor. No obvious leaks at the moment. It does seem to run. I will start it up. It's got good oil pressure. I don't hear any loud bangings and rattlings, although the muffler is broken, so it's kind of hard to really listen for any ticking sound. But I'll start it up. So I'll put a pipe on the muffler and I'll get that so it's a little quieter. It's the pipe from the engine to the muffler is broken, even though the muffler has a big hole in it. This is oil I've spilled that is smoking. I'm surprised how little oil it burned out, considering I pumped oil into the cylinders. But first signs are good. It doesn't have a choke. It's a manual choke, which is not adjusted properly, so that's why it kept stalling. Well, to finish the story on the truck, the gas tank has two of them. One somebody punched a hole in to drain it, I suppose, and the other one they put some kind of Mickey Mouse drain tap in it. It barely holds the fuel, but it is holding. I drained the tank and no dirt came out because the hole is pretty small, but there's nothing but crud coming up from the tank to the carburetor. So if I continue, it will mean taking off the tanks and going from there. If I had any brains, it would be going to the crusher. Thanks for watching. Conclusions thus far. I had to take the box off. I didn't say that before. I had to take the box off to get the gas tanks out because they were all full of crud. Well, not full, but significant amount of crud. This one I couldn't get out. one that sits here because of the tow bar that's welded on. So that was one reason to get it up out of the way, and the other reason was that I couldn't get this one down either. The bolts were a real problem because they're longer than a deep socket. So I did all that, and then it was still sucking air because this line for the back tank was always active, no matter what I did with the switch inside. So I took the valve out and blew it out. The valve sits up in here, if you can see it. Get up in here. And I found that it had some crud in it, but once I hooked some power to it, it was working properly. So then it had no power going to it in the truck. Not knowing at the moment which fuses are which, I just decided to let that go, and I just crossed the lines. So I put this tank lines onto the active port on the valve underneath. Then it sucked up gas, no problem. Filled up the carburetor, so I took it out. It was gutless as anything. I do have a dragging front caliper, so that's part of the problem. I could never really get it going. It wouldn't handle fourth gear. Just continually fall back down, and it was getting hot. It's low on fluid. I didn't really want to add any fluid until I knew whether the engine was any good or not. So now I can drain the old fluid and put new antifreeze in it. I know that it runs okay, it just needs power, and that might be a tune-up. And I've only set the timing by eyeball when I took the distributor out, so those are all things to check, and then maybe I can give it a little bit more of a comprehensive test. But no huge noises coming from it. Well, the exhaust is noisy. I did hook up the original exhaust, but there's a big hole in the muffler underneath. I'll progress a little bit further. Loads of work to do for rust. The box is pretty rusty, and the cab is extremely rusty. In order to close and open that door, I had to put that handy hillbilly support there. So I use that, pull the cab post forward here, and that brings the whole hinge forward, so then the door will close. You can see it flexes considerably. And there's a hole there in the floor. Lots of soft spots over there as well. The center tunnel seems to be good, and where the seat sits is good, but not a whole lot more. Well, the footwells are okay up on the sloped portion. Not sure when I'll get back to it next, but I think it's worth going a little further. The complication now, of course, is winter's coming, and another friend has offered me his '86 Ford, and that one has electric windows, so it's really fancy. So today I'm going to show you how to waste time for something totally useless. It's about 35 bucks a piece for new calipers for the '80 Ford, and I don't want to spend 70 bucks. So these calipers keep seizing up. I freed them up, and then when I go to use them, they're stuck again. So now I'm going to take them apart and see if there is any hope of freeing them up. Many years ago, I served 3 years of an apprenticeship as a mechanic on English cars mostly, but imports. And things were such then that it actually paid to have mechanics rebuild calipers. And sometimes we would just take them apart and polish them up and put some new seals in, and then they would be fine. So I'm going to take this one apart and see if the piston is shot. If so, then I'm forced to buy new calipers. If not, then maybe by polishing, since it's a ceramic piston, it appears, I may be able to put it back together and prove whether the truck is worth restoring or not. I really don't want to spend 70 bucks on something that may just end up going to the crusher. Let's go. One thing you need is a means to apply pressure. So I'm going to use air to try and drive the piston out. And it makes a big mess, so I put it inside this tray. And let's see what happens. It's been many years. And it's coming out gross. Look at that. Lots of particulate matter in there. So if you're tempted to buy a car that's been sitting for a long time, there's got to be a bunch of things to check before you go. Right now we're running about 70 pounds and I can't seal it off good enough. So I have to put a couple of fittings on there, I guess. Hey, I've put it in the vise. I've cranked the pressure up to 100. I've put a 3/8 fine bolt just threaded in there enough to restrict the airflow. It leaks, but not fast. I've cleared out the bleed valve, which was seized and plugged. I have gotten it to move about 1/4 of an inch, and so I'll just keep working at it. I used the valve stem on the bleed valve with a tire chuck. Apparently you can use a tire chuck on a bleed valve. So far I've only gotten one apart. You can see the crap that's in here. If it wasn't so cheap, I'd replace it. Since the last I showed you, the front calipers were a total disaster. I've got to replace them. I've had to take the box off as I showed, and it has driven. As long as I don't touch the brakes, it seems to be okay. I found out most of the power problem was that it was getting very little throttle. So the upshot is, no decision has been made. I do like to waffle. Please consider a like, share, subscribe, or notify.